Lake Mead is at near record low. The Ogallala Aquifer has lost more than 50% of its saturated thickness in the southern high plains. The southeast just finished the driest September through March on record. And starting Tuesday, the first significant heat wave of summer 2026 is going to push the central farm belt into a rapid onset drought window, while 21 red flag warnings load the western interior for fire. This is what running out of water looks like before the worst of the summer even arrives. Here is the data, the science, and what to watch for next. At 4:04 this morning Eastern Time, the National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center in College Park, Maryland, issued an extended forecast discussion that put the summer of 2026 on the calendar. The discussion projects the upper-level pattern across the central and eastern United States through Tuesday, June 9th, through Saturday, June 13th. And inside that discussion, in language the agency does not use casually, the forecaster wrote a phrase that defines what the next 7 days are going to look like. He wrote, quote, "Significant heat wave will build over a large portion of the central to eastern U.S. mid to late next week." He called it, quote, "the first significant heat wave of the summer." That phrase is the marker. The Weather Prediction Center has now officially declared that summer 2026's heat regime has begun. The configuration is not approaching. It is not on the horizon. It is here. And the same morning that forecast went out, the National Weather Service's active alerts feed was carrying 235 active weather alerts across the country. 21 were red flag warnings. 16 were fire weather watches. 25 were flood warnings. The Climate Prediction Center issued a Rapid Onset Drought watch for the central and east central continental United States, valid June 9th through 15th, the same window as the heat wave. The Storm Prediction Center issued a Day 1 fire weather outlook with a critical risk area across the Great Basin. 4 separate alerts, 4 separate forecast products, 4 separate stories on the public-facing forecast architecture. They are one story. They are the 4 operational faces of a single continental-scale weather configuration. And that configuration is landing on a country that has been running out of water for 2 decades. Look at the regional forecast geometry from the morning June 6 cycle, and you can read the shape of the configuration directly. The National Weather Service office in Boulder, Colorado, wrote that Denver is forecast to land within 2 degrees Fahrenheit of the existing all-time June 6th temperature record of 95 degrees, set in 1918. Sunday's forecast lands within 2 degrees of the 98-degree record. The Boulder office characterized Tuesday as, quote, "a blast furnace-type day," with a 50 to 60% chance of triple-digit readings on the Northeast Plains. The National Weather Service office in Milwaukee issued a hazardous weather outlook flagging heat advisory potential for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. Green Bay's office wrote that heat indices will climb into the mid to upper 90s at most locations, with a few 100-degree readings possible midweek. That is Wisconsin. In the first week of June, the Grand Forks, North Dakota office flagged heat-related impacts for Sunday and mid to late week. The Miami office wrote that maximum heat index values will rise into the low to mid 100s for the Gulf Coast on Sunday. The Washington-Baltimore office flagged mid-Atlantic heat indices briefly approaching 95 degrees today, with the Weather Prediction Center adding that overnight lows for the weekend are expected above 70 degrees across the mid-Atlantic. That last detail matters more than the daytime peaks. Overnight lows above 70 degrees are the marker that the heat wave is operationally dangerous. Heat waves kill not on the hottest single day, but on the 3rd or 4th day when the human body has not had a cool night to recover. The Mid-Atlantic forecast upper 80s and 90s with overnight lows above 70 meets that operational profile. The Plains push toward 100 meets it. The Wisconsin heat advisory potential meets it. And the configuration is the same continental scale pattern that the Weather Prediction Center has been tracking. A ridge over the south central and eastern United States, a trough over the western United States, an unseasonably strong June surface low forecast to move across the northern plains Tuesday into Wednesday, sharpening the pressure gradient and amplifying both the heat to its south and the severe weather along its frontal zone. The Storm Prediction Center has Day 1 slight risk, areas across 2 distinct regions today. Day 2 adds a slight risk in the northern plains with hail to the size of golf balls, 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and, in the language of the Storm Prediction Center, perhaps a tornado or two across north-central North Dakota. The same configuration, then, is producing the heat dome over the central and eastern United States. The severe weather along its frontal zone in the northern plains, the heavy rainfall and flood event in Texas, where high-resolution ensemble forecast guidance is showing potential for 6 to 10 inches of rain along the Interstate 35 and Interstate 20 corridor through Sunday morning, and the multi-river flood emergency on the Missouri River, the Grand River, the Platte River, and the 102nd River across western Missouri, eastern Nebraska, and southern South Dakota. 25 active flood warnings, 12 of them on rivers in the Missouri Basin, all produced by the same upper-level pattern that the Weather Prediction Center named this morning. While the heat dome builds across the central and eastern United States, the same configuration is loading the western interior for fire. The Storm Prediction Center's Day 1 fire weather outlook designates a critical risk area across the Great Basin today, plus an elevated risk area, plus an isolated dry thunderstorm risk area. The National Weather Service's active alerts feed carries 21 red flag warnings and 16 fire weather watches simultaneously. Look at the operational specifics. The Las Vegas office's red flag warning covers the Lake Mead National Recreation Area on both Arizona and Nevada sides, the Northwest Deserts, Lincoln County, Nye County's deserts, the Sheep Range, the Spring Mountains, and Clark County. The warning specifies southwest winds 20 to 25 miles per hour, with gusts up to 40 miles per hour, and relative humidity in the 5 to 15% range. The Reno office is running multi-zone red flag warnings across eastern Lassen County, the northern Sierra Front, the West Humboldt Basin, and the Lahontan Basin. The Elko office is running red flag warnings with humidity as low as 9% and gusts near 35 miles per hour. The Riverton, Wyoming office is running a red flag warning for Natrona County with humidity as low as 7% and gusts to 35 miles per hour. The Denver office is running a red flag warning across northeast Colorado with humidity as low as 14%. The Pocatello, Idaho office is running a fire weather watch valid Sunday morning through Sunday evening across the Snake River Valley. That is the geographic shape of the western interior fire belt under operational loading right now. It runs from southern Idaho through Nevada, through Wyoming, through Colorado, through Utah. It traces the southern flank of the upper-level trough. And the mechanism is structural, the same configuration that delivers cool, unsettled weather to Seattle and the Pacific Northwest, delivers descending, dry, windy air to the Great Basin. The trough's eastern edge becomes the western edge of the ridge. The dry air on the trough's southern flank is mechanically the same configuration that is holding the heat dome in place over the central and eastern United States. The fire weather and the heat dome are not two events. They are the same continental configuration's two operational faces. And the loading does not stop today. The National Weather Service office in Goodland, Kansas, covering the convergence of Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska, issued a hazardous weather outlook this morning that wrote, quote, "Critical fire weather conditions are possible during the middle of next week across portions of the tri-state area. A 30% chance that these conditions last for several hours. Fires that develop may rapidly grow and spread out of control. A 30% probability that critical fire weather conditions hold for several hours next week. The same middle of next week that the heat wave is at peak intensity. The same middle of next week that the Rapid Onset Drought Watch is operationally valid. 3 independent forecast products from 3 independent national centers, all pointing at the same window. That is what convergence looks like in the data. The configuration is landing on a country whose structural water systems are operationally short. This is the part of the story that almost nobody is reading together with the heat wave forecast. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir on the Colorado River, sits behind Hoover Dam at the Arizona-Nevada border. Lake Powell, the second largest, sits behind Glen Canyon Dam on the Utah-Arizona border. Both are at near record low levels. Combined storage has been below long-term average for more than a decade. The basin supplies water to approximately 40 million people across Los Angeles, San Diego, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, Salt Lake City, Denver, and the agricultural breadbasket of the Imperial Valley. It is operating under tiered shortage declarations, established by the 2007 Interim Guidelines, the 2019 Drought Contingency Plans, and the recently updated 2026 Framework. Arizona is taking the largest cuts. Nevada is taking cuts. Mexico is taking cuts. Underneath the high plains sits the Ogallala Aquifer, which supplies approximately 30% of all the irrigation water used in the United States and drinking water to approximately 2.5 million people. The United States Geological Survey publicly tracks well levels across the aquifer. The data shows that saturated thickness, the depth of water-bearing rock available to wells, has declined substantially over the past several decades, particularly in the southern high plains, across western Kansas, the Oklahoma Panhandle, the Texas Panhandle, and eastern New Mexico. Some portions of the aquifer have lost more than 50% of their pre-development saturated thickness. The withdrawal rate exceeds the recharge rate by a factor that is not closing. In the southeast, the September 2025 through March 2026 period was the driest such period on record across Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Some spring 2026 rainfall has provided partial relief, but reservoirs and groundwater across much of the southeast remain below normal. The Climate Prediction Center's Rapid Onset Drought Watch for the central and east central continental United States, valid June 9th through 15th, is the institutional acknowledgement that the heat wave is going to drive evaporative demand higher across regions that are not yet in the worst drought categories. Rapid onset drought operates on the days to weeks timescale. It is the flash drought signature, the atmosphere demanding moisture from the soil faster than the soil can supply it. This is what running out of water means in operational terms. The water is not gone. The water is not at the time, place, and rate the systems of the country need it. The Colorado River Basin is structurally short. The Ogallala is structurally depleted. The southeast is exiting the driest fall and winter on record. The central farm belt is going into a rapid onset drought window. And the heat wave is going to amplify every one of these depletions simultaneously. The country does not have the slack to absorb it. The cascading effects are predictable. The heat wave drives municipal water demand higher across the Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles metropolitan areas, all of which draw from the Colorado River Basin. The heat wave drives agricultural irrigation demand higher across the high plains, pulling additional water from the Ogallala. The heat wave drives soil moisture loss across the central farm belt during the corn and soybean growing season. The heat wave drives evapotranspiration from the southeast reservoirs and groundwater that are still recovering from the driest fall and winter on record. Every demand center, every system, every region pulls on a supply that is already operating below long-term average. The structural reality is that the country built its water infrastructure around mid-20th century estimates of annual flow that have not held for the 21st century, and the heat wave that started today is going to test every one of those infrastructure assumptions simultaneously over the next 90 days. The peer-reviewed climate science literature on continental compound configurations, like this one, is unambiguous about the structural mechanism. Park Williams and his colleagues published a paper in Nature Climate Change in 2022 that quantified the Southwest North American megadrought. Their result is that the 2000 through 2021 megadrought was the most severe in at least 1,200 years, based on tree ring reconstructions of soil moisture. They attributed approximately 42% of the megadrought severity to anthropogenic climate forcing. The western United States is not in a temporary drought. The western United States is in a long-term aridification trajectory. John Abatzoglu and Park Williams published a paper in PNAS in 2016 that documented that anthropogenic climate change roughly doubled western United States forest fire area between 1984 and 2015. The mechanism is the vapor pressure deficit. Warmer air pulls moisture from fuels faster. Drier fuels burn faster and hotter. And the structural feedback produces the catastrophic fire behavior the West has been documenting for 2 decades. The Camp Fire of 2018, which killed 85 people in Paradise, California. The Dixie Fire of 2021. The Maui Fires of 2023, which killed more than 100 people in Lahaina. The Park Fire of 2024. Every one of those catastrophes was produced under fire weather conditions, similar to the conditions the configuration is loading right now. Anthony Westerling and his colleagues published a paper in Science in 2006 documenting that earlier snowmelt extended the western United States fire season by approximately 78 days since the mid-1980s. The first week of June 2026 is well inside the operational fire season. The fuels at all elevations are drying simultaneously. The configuration is loading against a landscape that has been ready to burn for weeks. The World Weather Attribution Rapid Attribution Study of the 2021 Pacific Northwest Heat Dome found the event to be approximately 150 times less likely without human-caused climate change and characterized it as, quote, virtually impossible in the pre-industrial baseline. The IPCC Sixth Assessment Working Group 1 carries high confidence that hot extremes have become more frequent and more intense across most land regions, and that compound events co-occurring extreme heat, drought, and fire weather are increasing. The wet bulb threshold framework is directly relevant to the heat wave's impact on human bodies. The wet bulb temperature is the lowest temperature to which the air can be cooled by evaporation. For decades, the field used a theoretical wet bulb threshold of approximately 35 degrees Celsius, derived from a Sherwood and Huber paper in PNAS in 2010. In 2022, Daniel Vaselio and his colleagues at the Pennsylvania State University Heat Project published empirical chamber study data in the Journal of Applied Physiology, showing that the actual wet bulb threshold above which young, healthy adults cannot maintain core body temperature is approximately 31 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees lower than the theoretical limit. A follow-up Vaselio paper in PNAS in 2023 found an even lower threshold for older adults. 2015 Karachi killed approximately 2,000 people when wet bulb temperatures reached 32.2 degrees Celsius during the day and stayed at 25.6 degrees at night during Ramadan, exceeding the threshold for hours over multiple days, while the grid failed under cooling demand. That is the operational ceiling. And it is much closer than the climate science community thought it was 20 years ago. There is a viral framing that circulates whenever a configuration like this one loads. The framing is that the heat wave is engineered, that HARP is involved, or that the fires are deliberately set by directed energy weapons. The framing is wrong, and the data shows why. HARP's installed transmitter capacity is approximately 3.6 megawatts of radio frequency energy, about 3.1 times 10 to the 11th joules per day. A continental-scale omega block configuration sustains itself at approximately 10 to the 18th joules per day. That is a gap of 7 orders of magnitude. No installed human technology has the energy budget to sustain a continental wave configuration. The independent forecast architecture rebuttal applies just as cleanly. The European Centre, the Global Forecast System, the Canadian model, the United Kingdom Met Office, and the Google DeepMind GenCast model all converge on the same configuration. Coordinated falsification across architecturally independent systems is not a credible explanation. The fires are not directed energy weapons. The fire ignition forensic record is one of the most robust disciplines in modern wildfire investigation. CAL FIRE, the United States Forest Service, and state agencies trace ignition sources for nearly all wildfires that reach critical thresholds. The Camp Fire was traced to a Pacific gas and electric transmission line failure. The Dixie Fire was traced to a Pacific gas and electric distribution line failure. Power line arcs, lightning, vehicle exhaust, equipment use, and unextinguished campfires account for nearly every documented ignition. The configuration is the loading. The trigger is conventional. The question this configuration sets up is not whether the next week is going to be hot. The forecast already answers that. The question is what happens over the next 90 days. There are essentially 3 readings. The most conservative reading is that the configuration produces a meaningful but bounded multi-day heat wave, a regional fire weather event with no major ignition, a rapid onset drought watch that resolves without major agricultural impact, and a flood event that produces localized damage. The Omega Block breaks down by approximately June 12th or 15th, and the country returns to a normal early summer regime. That outcome carries roughly a 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 probability. The middle reading and the most defensible one is the operational verification of a multi-week compound regime. The Omega Block has been holding since approximately May 27th. The historical analog persistence climatology for blocks in this class, the 2003 European 20-day event, the 2010 Russian 35-day event, the 2021 Pacific Northwest 14-day event. The 2022 European 18-day event has a mean of approximately 22 days, with a standard deviation of approximately 8 days. The configuration is on day 17. It is well within the historical range to persist into late June. That reading carries roughly a 50% probability. The aggressive reading is that the configuration that started today is the leading edge of the worst summer in modern American history. That outcome depends on the central ridge persisting through July, on the Niño 3.4 transition delivering its El Niño teleconnection, on a major wildfire igniting during one of the critical fire weather windows, and on a major Atlantic hurricane landfall coinciding with a peak heat dome window. The probability is in the 15 to 25% range. Not low, not high, meaningful. What to watch for next week? Whether the central ridge holds through June 15th or breaks down. Whether the Goodland office's 30% probability of critical fire weather conditions for several hours converts into an actual ignition. Whether the Texas rainfall exceeds the 6 to 10 inch forecast. Whether the Niño 3.4 index crosses the formal El Niño threshold in the next 2 ocean data windows. Whether the heat attributable mortality across the central and eastern United States begins to accumulate. Every one of those signals will be visible in public forecast products as it develops. The synthesis is yours. The configuration that started today is the operational front edge of a much larger story. The country has been running out of water for 2 decades. The heat wave is the amplifier. The structural depletion is the load-bearing baseline. The next 90 days will answer whether this summer is remembered as the worst in modern American history, or whether the country gets lucky and the configuration breaks down before the cascade propagates through the systems. The forecasters are not predicting catastrophe. The forecasters are predicting operational stress at multi-system scale. That is what they have already put in writing. The rest is up to the weather.